In the dead of night, with the mercury plunging past 40 below, Frank Owens sits reading by a single flame inside the abandoned lime kiln, while the town down in the valley freezes solid around him.
Heat doesn't leave stone in a hurry, Brindle.
Last winter, in the drafty cabin where he'd brought his wife Clara to recover, the cold had found every seam and crack.
I couldn't stop it. The moving air took her before spring.
Now, months later, Frank knelt before the kiln's arched draw hole, packing mud and straw into every gap with bleeding hands.
Not this time. This time the cold stays outside.
In town, Merrick's general store had already delivered its verdict.
You are living in a furnace stack, Owens. That thing's a tomb, not a home.
Only a madman would trust stone to hold heat through a mountain winter.
But Frank carried his grief, like a debt he meant to pay, and the kiln was the only currency he had left. The next morning, Frank walked into the valley town with Brindle at his heel, the cold already searching through his coat.
Stocking up for your furnace, Owens. You'll burn through a winter's wood in a week.
I'll need less than you think. The stone does most of the work.
Stone draws cold like a grave. You'll be frozen stiff before Christmas.
That kiln survived hotter fires than any winter this valley will see. I'll take my chances.
He paid for flour and coffee and silver, the coins cold on the counter. The store bell jangled as he pushed out.
You are a stubborn man, Owens. The quarry won't save you if that stack caves in.
A few townsfolk paused on the boardwalk, their laughter thin in the frozen air.
Let them laugh. The cold can't be ignored with jokes.
By dusk, Frank was back at the kiln, the quarry trail behind him, swallowed by fresh snow, his supplies stacked neatly against the stone.
It's no cabin, Brindle, but it might be warmer.
He laid a bed of straw against the curved wall and set a small shelf for his few books.
Clara would have called me crazy, but she would have come anyway. Old Tobin swore lime kilns didn't cool overnight. The rock stores the fire's heart.
With the old lime burner's words in his head, Frank arranged kindling in the center hearth.
All right, old girl. Let's see if you remember how to burn.
The flame caught, thin and wavering, then steadied. Looking upward toward the vent, Frank sat back and watched the fire grow. The stone around him drank in the light.
Feel that, Brindle? The walls are already getting warm.
For the first time in a year, he allowed himself a sliver of hope that this winter might not be a grave. Frank woke an hour before dawn. The fire had collapsed to a nest of cooling embers.
Stone still warm. Tobin knew what he was talking about.
Down in the valley, the cold was a hard, grasping presence that found every crack.
Solid ice. Can't even keep a bucket of water from freezing in this drafty hole.
The stove in Merrick's store barely kept the front room above freezing.
Need to check the seal. A draft will steal more heat than the cold itself.
He eased the draw hole seal aside. A razor blade of air shot through and stung his face.
That wind didn't cool these walls 1 degree. They don't even know it's cold out there.
He added a handful of sticks, and the stone, still holding yesterday's fire, woke the flame quickly. In town, Carl rubbed his hands over the stove and thought about the man in the furnace stack.
Time to see if these walls can hold heat on their own.
He let the fire collapse to a bed of cooling ash and watched the clock.
3 hours. The stone is still warm. It's like a banked stove.
Then a whisper of moving air touched his neck. A draft, thin as a blade, near the draw hole.
Clara's cabin had a dozen cracks like that. I sealed them too late.
He packed the gap with frozen mud and straw, hands remembering every seam he'd failed before.
Never again. The moving air won't take anyone else.
Down in the valley, pipes froze solid. Stove fires guttered and died before dawn.
This cold is eating the town alive. We can't keep up.
But up at the quarry, the kiln held steady, and Frank's grief pressed closer with every passing night. 2 days later, the sky over the quarry turned the color of beaten pewter. A storm was gathering.
I've seen lime burners seal their kilns for a controlled burn. Clay, snow, and straw will hold against any blow.
He worked the mixture into every seam around the draw hole, packing it tight as masonry.
Keep the moving air out, and the stone does the work.
Owens hasn't come down for a week. That storm could bury him up there.
He chose his grave, Carl. Leave him to it.
I can't stop thinking about him. What if he's right about that kiln?
Frank pulled the final plank into place and looked toward the darkening ridge. He was as ready as any man could be. The town below had no idea. That night, the first gusts shook the eaves in the valley. The storm was coming. The storm slammed into the valley without warning. A cabin roof split under the weight of snow and crashed inward.
Thomas, where are you? Answer me.
They dragged the injured into the church basement, but the cold followed them through the stone walls. A child cried in its mother's arms, the sound thin against the wind howling outside.
His leg is broken. We need warmth and a splint, not this frozen hole.
Miles up the quarry, the kiln stood silent beneath the screaming wind, snow piling against its thick stone walls.
Hear that, Brindle? The storm is tearing the valley apart, but in here, not even a whisper of moving air.
Brindle slept on, undisturbed. Frank checked the seal and found it proof against the storm.
The stone doesn't care about the storm. It just keeps giving back the heat.
In the church basement, a dozen souls huddled together and wondered if they would see morning. Carl left the church basement and fought his way up the quarry trail. The blizzard clawed at his coat with unseen claws.
Owens. Frank Owens. You alive in there?
Frank pulled the plank aside. Carl stumbled in, and the warmth hit him like a summer wall.
Good Lord, Frank. It's like a baker's oven in here. How?
The walls are a battery of heat. I just add a little spark each day, and the stone does the rest.
Carl touched the stone. It radiated a deep, slow warmth that had nothing to do with the tiny fire.
Coffee's hot. It takes next to nothing to keep the kiln warm.
All those nights freezing in the store. And you've been living in this. I should have listened.
The storm's still wild. Don't tell them yet. They won't believe you. Not until they feel it themselves.
Carl drank the coffee and carried its heat back down into the blinding snow, carrying a hope the town hadn't given him. Carl pushed through the basement door, his clothes frozen like tin. The huddled townsfolk turned toward the gust of cold.
I found Owens. He's alive. The kiln is warmer than any cabin in this valley.
A few faces lit with cautious hope. Others tightened in suspicion.
You expect us to trust a fool in a furnace? We're freezing down here, and you want us to follow a ghost?
I am telling you, the stone was warm to the touch. He's got coffee, a fire, and walls that hold the heat. I sat there and felt it.
Then a baby's cough cut through the dark, deep, rattling, the kind that didn't stop. A murmur rippled through the room. Arguments bloomed in the shadowed corners. A young father whispered, "Maybe we should go."
It's a death trap. You'll all freeze on the trek.
The storm screamed overhead, and the basement grew colder by the hour. No one would sleep. The night stretched into an iron-gray dawn. An old man began shivering so hard his teeth rattled, like stones.
We have to go now. That baby won't last another night in this cold.
I'll go, not for you, Carl, for Thomas. He needs a fire and a doctor, and this frozen hole has neither.
A handful of figures pulled on frozen coats and lifted children bundled in blankets, ready to face the blizzard. Up at the kiln, Frank stacked his last armload of split wood. The pile looked dangerously thin.
Not enough. If this storm keeps blowing another 3 days, not enough. Maybe the town was right. Maybe a furnace stack is just a fool's grave after all.
He braced himself and brought the axe down on the last log, the crack echoing through the stone chamber. Outside, the storm showed no mercy. The wind howled as if it meant to scour the quarry clean. Down in the valley, the small group pushed into the white fury, Lydia's face set hard as flint. The group crawled up the quarry trail, whiteout blinding them. A mother fell, clutching her baby. Carl pulled her up.
If we stop, We freeze. Keep moving. Keep moving.
Through the swirling snow, a faint orange glow appeared. The kiln's draw hole. Warm against the storm, inside the kiln. Brindle's bark cut the stillness. Frank set down his book and moved toward the seal. He pulled the plank aside, and a gust of frozen air brought with it the shape of a woman, ice-caked and shaking.
Owens, we need help. Thomas is hurt. The baby.
Get inside, all of you, now.
The kiln filled with ragged, shivering bodies. The warmth enveloped them like a blanket.
Here, sit close to the wall. The stone is warm.
The children stopped crying. For the first time in hours, hope flickered inside the old lime kiln. The cold began to loosen its grip on the huddled bodies. Lydia, her face raw from frost, pulled away from Thomas and walked toward Frank.
I called you a fool. I am sorry, Owens.
I didn't invent this. The stone does the work. Walls 4 feet thick, soak up heat and give it back slow. A little fire goes a long way.
A child, no more than 4, pressed both hands to the stone and giggled. Mama, it's warm. Like a cat, the mother touched the stone, then looked toward Frank with an expression caught between shame and relief. Others, too, placed their hands on the warm rock.
That warmth was put in yesterday. It's still holding.
Disbelief melted into quiet wonder as the truth of the kiln, the battery of heat, settled over them.
I didn't understand. We were all wrong about you.
It's not about me. It's about the stone. We can build more like this. No one should lose their family to a draft.
Without warning, a violent gust hammered the kiln. The draw-hole plank shifted with a splintering crack, and a freezing jet of air sliced into the chamber.
The seal. It's opening.
Frank lunged toward the crack. The memory of Clara's dying breath slamming into him, cold air moving through cracks, stealing what couldn't be replaced.
Stay back. I've got it. Keep the fire fed.
He shoved frozen mud, straw, and rags into the gap with bare hands. The cold bit like teeth, but he packed faster than the wind could steal. His coat followed, wool stuffed into the breach. Then his shirt until the screaming air became a thin whine.
Frank, your hands, they're bleeding.
Clara died from cracks smaller than this. Not again. Not in my kiln.
He pressed his weight against the patch until the wind outside battered uselessly against the seal. Once more, the storm still screamed, but the kiln held. Frank's hands dripped red, and in the flickering light, the cost of survival was written on every face. Frank slid down the wall, exhausted, staring at his bleeding hands as if they belonged to someone else.
How did you know to fix it so fast? You didn't even think.
Last winter, my Clara died in a cabin that leaked heat. The cold moved through every crack. I couldn't stop it. I tried, but the moving air took her before spring. This time I built walls that would hold life in. I couldn't save her, but I wasn't going to watch it happen again.
The kiln went silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath.
Frank.
Lydia Hatch wept. Not for herself, not for Thomas, but for the man who'd carried a grave inside him all winter.
All this time, we called you a fool, and you were just trying to outrun a ghost.
It's not a ghost, it's a debt. And the kiln paid it.
Sometime in the deep hours, the storm's fury softened to a low, exhausted moan. The draw-hole seal held firm, and the worst had passed.
That's the storm blowing itself out. We can breathe now.
Frank fed the last of his split wood onto the embers, one stick at a time. The fire surged upward, and the stone walls drank in the new heat once more.
That's the last of it, isn't it?
We'll make it stretch. The walls will hold the heat.
Lydia broke her last loaf of bread and shared it among the huddled families. For a moment, with coffee cups steaming, the kiln felt less like a furnace stack and more like a home.
I haven't thanked you properly. If you hadn't been here.
You'd have found a way. People are tougher than they think.
An old woman began to pray quietly, her words soft against the hum of the wind. Others joined and murmured thanks. Moving quietly, Frank slipped Clara's photograph from his inner coat and placed it on a stone ledge where the firelight could touch it like a blessing. No more secrets. Clara was part of this place now, just as these people were, and the kiln had become more than a refuge. It was a witness. Dawn broke over the quarry. The sky a pale, frozen blue. The world impossibly still after the storm's rage. Frank pushed open the draw-hole seal, and a knife of cold air slid past him, but the kiln's walls held their warmth like a promise.
You built what we all needed, Frank. A place that doesn't betray you to the cold.
It's just stone and common sense. Anybody can do it.
I'll send up a sled of wood by noon. You won't be short again.
We'll build more for next winter. No one should lose their family to a draft.
The group trudged down the quarry trail, leaving deep tracks in the fresh snow, carrying the story of the kiln's warmth back to the valley. Frank stood in the kiln's entrance with Brindle, watching the line of people disappear among the pines.
I am not alone now. Clara would have liked that.
He turned back inside and pulled the plank mostly shut, leaving just a crack for the smoke. And for the first time since autumn, the silence inside the stone walls felt like company. By midday, the story of the kiln had passed from mouth to mouth along the frozen street. A gathering formed outside Merrick's store.
I was in that kiln. It's no tomb. It's the warmest shelter within 20 miles.
He saved my Thomas. He saved us all. I called him a fool, and I was wrong.
The old skepticism melted like frost in a warm room. A vote was called, build new stone shelters before next winter, with Frank Owens as advisor. They sent for Frank. He walked down the quarry trail by afternoon, Brindle at his side, and stepped into the circle of people who had once called him a fool.
Frank, the town's asking you to show us how.
It's simple. Walls thick as a kiln, a good seal, and a tight flue. The stone does the heavy work.
He sketched a rough plan on a plank, a communal shelter with thick stone walls and a central hearth, like the kiln that had saved them. A man from the back, a carpenter who'd lost his roof in the storm, called out, "Will you help us build it?"
I'll be here.
Weeks later, on a hillside above the town, the bones of a new shelter rose from the frozen ground, stone upon stone, thick as a kiln's walls.
Stacked tight, no gaps. The seal is everything.
A line of children passed small stones hand to hand, their laughter ringing in the cold air.
I'll never doubt a lime kiln again. Next, you'll tell me stone can cook breakfast.
Maybe it can. We'll try that next. Each stone feels like a payment. Clara would understand.
The work was a kind of penance. Each heavy stone, a small payment on a debt that could never be fully settled. By nightfall, the walls stood shoulder high, and the central flue gaped open, ready to carry a winter's worth of heat.
This will hold heat longer than any wooden cabin. You've given us a future here, Frank.
Frank ran his hand over the rough stone and allowed himself a small, quiet hope that Clara's death might mean something after all. The first thaw softened the ground a week later, and Frank walked a half-mile over a low ridge to a hillside where a simple wooden marker stood in the brown grass. Brindle padded quietly beside him, nose testing the softening air, but her eyes stayed on Frank.
I found a way to beat the cold, Clara. The stone did what I couldn't before. I just wish you'd been with me. That's all.
He stood in the long silence, the kind that follows words that can never be taken back. The sun, thin but warmer now, melted the frost from the marker's edge, and a small wildflower pushed through a crack in the frozen earth nearby.
Maybe this is what it feels like to let go a little.
He stayed until the last of the frost melted from the wood, then turned to walk back toward the quarry, Brindle following without a call. On the quarry ridge, a thin ribbon of smoke still rose from the kiln's mouth, patient and steady. He would go back to it, not as a hermit, but as a man who had buried his guilt alongside his wife, and could finally carry only her memory. Inside the kiln, Frank knelt before a smooth patch of wall, chisel and hammer in hand.
Clara, you deserve to be part of this stone. It's the only way I know to keep you warm.
He began to carve, each letter deliberate. The tap of the hammer soft in the quiet chamber. The name rose from the rock. Clara, rough as grief, solid as the kiln itself. Beside the name, he hollowed a small niche and placed her photograph inside it. Angled toward the firelight, the worn photograph glowed amber, and the carved name seemed to hold the light.
We made it, girl.
Brindle pressed against his leg, and Frank rested his hand on her head. He sat a long time, not grieving, just remembering, as the kiln's steady warmth filled the space. The old lime kiln, built to bake stone until it crumbled, had become a shrine where a man's love could never freeze. Spring spread across the quarry, a rush of pale green and melting snow. The new stone shelter stood finished on its hillside. At the kiln, Frank stood in the open draw hole with Brindle, watching the smoke curl upward into the warming sky.
Thought I'd find you here. The new shelter's holding heat, just like you said.
I'll stay through the summer. The kiln's been good to me.
You changed this town, Frank. Folks don't talk about the fool in the furnace anymore.
The rock did it. I just listened.
Carl shook his head, smiling, and clapped Frank on the shoulder before starting back down the quarry trail. A small bird landed on the kiln's rim, chirping once before darting away, and Frank watched it go. Frank looked out over the valley, where the new shelter's roof gleamed in the afternoon light. The smoke kept rising, steady and sure, and the old lime kiln stood as it always had, a furnace turned into a home. As the sun sank toward the ridge, the old lime kiln caught the last light, its stone glowing amber against the deepening sky. In the entrance, Frank sat with Brindle, their forms small against the massive arch, a man and his dog against the stone. At the base of the kiln, new grass pushed through the stones. Green life where only cold had been. Above, a ribbon of smoke drifted into the twilight, as it had for years before, and would for years to come. Frank rested a hand on Brindle's head, the silence between them full of everything that had passed. Through the draw hole, the warm glow pulsed like a steady heart, a promise of heat that would never fail. The quarry stretched behind, scarred and silent, but the kiln no longer seemed abandoned. The old lime kiln had burned for a lifetime before Frank found it. After that winter, it burned a little longer for all of them, and in the great silence of the quarry, the smoke climbed into the darkening sky, and a man and his dog sat still, together.